If there's one thing that's been rampant since the dawn of time, it's crime. And you know what happens when you get caught for one during medieval times? Well, let's just say things get super twisted. From trapping humans in life-size bulls to boiling them to death. These are some of the worst punishments in human history. First up, we've got the Brazen Bull. Crafted by a guy named Perillos of Athens back in the 6th century BC, this gruesome contraption was cooked up for the Sicilian tyrant Phalaris. But for what? Well, to deal with anyone who dared to oppose him, because you know they weren't really about democracy in that era. It was a life-sized bronze bull statue with a door on one side. Unfortunate souls were shoved in through that door, which was then sealed tight. And here's where it gets really brutal. A fire beneath the bull was ignited, turning the metal red hot. Now the victims weren't just dealing with intense pain. They had to endure the horrific amplification of their screams. The bull's hollow head made it sound like a real bull, creating terrifying noises. Inside that confined space, the bronze heated up, causing severe burns and turning it into a chamber of excruciating pain. That meant a slow and agonizing death. And guess what? This torture wasn't limited to ancient Greece. Phalaris used it to keep his authority in check, and later, during the Roman Emperor Nero's reign, it was used on early Christians. Thankfully, the bull is a thing of the past. But let's get real. It's just one example of the wickedness our history has seen. Let's delve into impalement, a horrific practice known as kozika in Arabic. With this one, you'd have a pointed wooden stick thrust through a person's body, emerging from the shoulder or mouth, with gravity doing its cruel work. The speed of death depended on the executioner's skill, and a sharper greased stick meant a quicker demise. Now, to make it even more agonizing, medieval executioners used flat-headed sticks, prolonging the process for hours or even days. They added insult to injury by feeding the victim and giving them a laxative, causing extra pain. Despite the unimaginable suffering, victims tried to find comfort, shifting like they would on a bus seat. But every movement drove the pointed head deeper, making things even worse and bloodier. This next one, though, makes impalement look like child's play. Let's talk about the blood eagle, a seriously brutal torture method that even made it into the Viking series. Vikings reserved this horror show for the bad guys, making it a brutal display of power and revenge. Here's the grisly rundown. The victim, tied up and face down, had their back sliced open along the spine. The executioner then pulled out their lungs and ribs, shaping it like an eagle's wings. It's as horrific as it sounds, leading to a slow, painful death from organ damage, shock, and blood loss. This macabre practice happened during the Viking Age, from the late 8th to early 11th centuries. Some say it has ties to Norse myths. Thankfully, it's now rightfully seen as a gross violation of human rights, sparing us from this gruesome spectacle today. Next, we'll travel south a little and talk about the wildlife there. In medieval Southeast Asia, one of the most gruesome punishments involved death by elephants. For centuries, humans had elephants as versatile companions, from aiding armies to constructing wonders like Angkor Wat. Despite their revered status in Buddhist and Hindu traditions, elephants took on a dark role as executioners during the Middle Ages. This brutal method targeted enemy soldiers or civilians charged with crimes like tax evasion and theft. Death by elephant featured the sheer force of an elephant's foot crushing the victim's head or abdomen. Some executioners made it even worse, training elephants to cut people open with blade-fitted tusks. While elephants aren't natural human predators, they were tragically trained to become executioners. This gruesome practice wasn't confined to the Middle Ages. It persisted for centuries across India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, surviving until the late 19th century. We're just grateful it's not a thing today. Speaking of unforgettable horrors, this next one is also seared into our brains. Up next, we have the breaking wheel. The Catherine wheel, also known as the breaking wheel, was a cruel and deadly tool used in medieval Europe. You'd be strapped to a giant wheel, your limbs stretched and secured. The executioner would then strike your limbs with heavy rods, causing severe harm but not immediate death. The battered body would be displayed for hours, leading to death from blood loss, shock, or dehydration. This wheel of horror was a go-to for crimes like treason and murder. Even the infamous German outlaw Peter Neers met his end this way. As more humane methods came, the breaking wheel's use kinda stopped, but it left a nasty impact on public memory. But it was so awful that we can't forget about it even to this day. On the subject of brutality, how can we forget Chinese water torture? This method is a unique form of torture that doesn't rely on physical harm, but instead plays mind games. Imagine being restrained, lying down, or sitting with your head held in place. You have a container above your forehead slowly dripping water onto the same spot at regular intervals. But it's the repetition that turns this simplicity into an unsettling experience. This technique messes with your head, literally. The rhythmic droplets create anxiety and a sense of helplessness. Over time, each drop feels like a relentless hammer hitting you in the same tiny spot on your forehead. It's not about physical pain, but the mental toll it takes can be profound. Chinese water torture is all about psychological suffering. Victims grapple with monotony, fear, and helplessness. Interestingly, this method has become a symbol of mental suffering in popular culture. It highlights the vulnerability of the human mind and the potential for abuse. You might have even seen it in books, movies, or TV shows. And here's a historical twist. Chinese water torture has been documented in psychological warfare during conflicts and battles. But if you think that was bad, you're not prepared for this next one. Let's talk about a gruesome chapter in history: boiling people alive. Yeah, you heard it right, and trust me, it's as horrifying as it sounds. Back in the day, this cruel method of execution was pretty common. They were really turning up the heat on people. It all started with good old Nero, the Roman emperor, who decided to turn up the brutality against Christians. Then came the Holy Roman Empire, and boiling became the go-to punishment for coin forgers. Even across the pond in Britain, our man Henry VIII thought, hey, let's use this boiling for those poison for murder situations. Now, a person condemned to death would be tossed into a giant pot of heated liquid. Could be water, oil, wax, or even molten lead. The agony was the next level, especially if the liquid hadn't hit the boiling point when the poor soul took the plunge. A quick exit was only on the table if the liquid was already boiling, or if the victim managed to pull off a head submerge move to, boil the brain. Boiling alive was considered one of the absolute worst ways to meet your end in the Middle Ages. Boiling became a fan-favorite execution method for forgers in France and Germany from the 13th to the 16th centuries. It stuck around until authorities figured out how to mint coins with milled edges, putting the brakes on this gruesome practice. Thanks for tuning in, and if you want to catch more awesome content like this, make sure to click on the next video.